I now give the floor to the distinguished permanent representative of Brazil.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And let me thank Ambassador John Ashe, President of the General Assembly, for convening these informal consultations, and his special representative, Crispin Gregoire, for being with us, as well as Ambassador Logar from Slovenia, in addition to your presence, dear friend Eduardo Libarri from Costa Rica. I wish to acknowledge also the presence of Mr. Liz Malizer, representative of the indigenous peoples. I understand Ms. Myrna Cunningham is not with us, but we also look forward to working with her. The Brazilian government welcomes the organization of this meeting as a step towards the implementation of Resolution 66/296. The resolution clearly sets out the modalities for the preparation and realization of the World Conference on Indigenous Peoples. On the drafting of the outcome document of the conference, the resolution is no less straightforward. It establishes a specific preparatory process which relies on these consultations with member states and indigenous peoples and on the views emerging from the interactive hearing. For this reason, Brazil understands that the present consultations are not a substitute for the interactive hearing itself. Brazil is firmly committed to the promotion and protection of the rights of indigenous peoples. We support the World Conference and the full participation of indigenous peoples in both the preparatory process and the conference itself. We expect the conference to strengthen the principles and to promote the implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which is the cornerstone of the UN system on these matters. As the result of an inclusive and well-informed negotiation process, the Declaration is a legitimate guide for states to fully safeguard and promote the realization of the rights of indigenous peoples. Therefore, the outcome document of the World Conference should not revisit issues already addressed by the Declaration, but rather concentrate its focus on the implementation of the Declaration. As we take note of the outcome document of the ALTA Preparatory Conference, let me recapitulate the suggestions made by Brazil 2 weeks ago during the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues on the 4 overarching themes of the aforementioned document. With a view to clarifying distinctions among the 4 themes, we suggested the titles, and I quote, territory and natural resources, unquote, and second item, quote, international institutions and cooperation, unquote, for themes 1 and 2. And for the 4th overarching session, we proposed, quote unquote, development policies. As regards the second theme, Brazil supports strengthening international institutions in charge of indigenous peoples' portfolio. In this spirit, we favor the reassessment of the mandates of the Permanent Forum, the expert mechanism, and the special rapporteur on the rights of indigenous peoples in order to strengthen cooperation among these institutions and avoid duplication. As Brazil stated at the 13th session, special attention should be paid to the Permanent Forum, whose current structure, in our view, is insufficient to represent indigenous peoples from all 7 social-cultural regions, in particular the most populous ones. Consequently, the Brazilian government proposes that the number of members be expanded from 16 to 20. Consistent with the principle of representation expressed in the resolution that created the forum, ECOSOC 2000/22, we also suggest that, assuming that 4 new seats be created, that out of the 10 positions for indigenous peoples representatives in a forum of 20 members, 2 be allocated to each of the 3 most populous social-cultural regions, namely Africa, Asia, and Central and South America and the Caribbean. On the 4th overarching theme, Brazil sustains that the aspirations of indigenous peoples be taken into account in the definition of the Sustainable Development Goals applicable to their societies in the post-2015 period. In the case of indigenous peoples, the human rights to development is to be exercised according to strategies and priorities freely determined by them as they have distinctive needs and aspirations. As we come to know from the 13th session of the Permanent Forum, much still remains to be done in order to improve the living conditions of indigenous peoples worldwide. Brazil reiterates its disposition to join forces with a view to guaranteeing a successful conference and a balanced and legitimate outcome document. I have just been informed that Madam Myrna is indeed present, so my apologies for having addressed her as if she had not been here. I'm very pleased with your presence. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much to the distinguished permanent representative of Brazil.